And at 10, the bite of 83. The bite of 83 is the inciting moment to FNAF 4. It's the reason the whole game is happening. Not the reason for the series as a whole, mind you, but considering how the main gameplay of this game is us having nightmare fever coma dreams, this bite is definitely an important one. And while yes, it's certainly disturbing to see on screen in 8-bit, I think it would be even worse to see it as a VHS tape. The realism that we would get from even like crappy footage is so bone-shaking that you can actually like feel as if you're in the situation. This whole genre of found footage really coming from the Blair Witch Project and its incredible marketing strategy. Like, I had a whole unit on marketing like this in college, okay? It's absolutely genius. And if that sort of style of cinematography was used to make like a whole FNAF movie, or even maybe just a couple of clips, we would all be sent screaming. And watching a kid get his skull crushed by an overpowered animatronic is definitely a shocking moment already. Also, did you know that only 17% of people who watch these videos are actually subscribed? You may not actually know that you're not subscribed, so be sure you check it. And if you aren't and you've watched this channel multiple times, click the button, okay? It makes me feel better about myself. In at 9, bag of rocks. Before Vanessa leaves Freddy in parts and service, okay, she says that it's so that his casing can be put on a new endo after they probably have someone on the clock who can do it normally. But, then after that, she doesn't seem to be suspicious that he's walking around in front of her maybe within like 3 minutes. What? Who would have repaired him if not for, like, if it wasn't Gregory? There's literally no other human in the Pizzaplex, or at least that's alive at this point, and you know, Freddy can't really do it himself. The whole cylinder thing is to protect humans, there are no staff bots in this section, and the only reason that you had to leave him was because nobody else was working. Hello? You there, McFly? Like, why would Vanessa be so chill about Freddy just like walking around in front of her? She literally left him with his head removed, and now she's like, what, assuming that he somehow did it himself, which is literally impossible as he was strapped down? Even if he had done it himself, why wouldn't she see him and then confine him to his room, especially after just accusing him of helping to protect Gregory, okay? It's something that confuses me like so much, and I found it weird in my first playthrough, so I figured that if we got close to Vanessa, she would pull us out of Freddy, but like, I walked up to her to test it and nothing. She gave absolutely zero shits. Like, why? She's dumber than a bag of rocks at this point. It would have been so easy just to make like that little modification to her code for at least this part of the game, like making her a little bit more dangerous if she saw Freddy, but no, they didn't. In at 8, Princess Quest. The whole reason Princess Quest is a thing in this game was to lock Vanessa away in her brain and prevent her from regaining full control over her body. So why did William create or allow for the creation of a fail-safe in this system that allows her to escape? I mean, like, sure, they didn't expect a kid to come along and figure it out maybe, but first of all, it's an arcade machine, of course I'm gonna goddamn play it, but also given the track record of literally all of your plans, you'd think that Afton would have smartened up after like 40 years at the very least, but he doesn't, okay? It's like having a self-destruct button on the bomb that you plan to use to blow up Gotham City, okay? Or like it's like, I don't get it. It's like if the Joker had a purify water supply button just on him or something, okay? It's dumb. If you want something to work, why give it a way to fail? Or maybe that's just my brain and my perfectionism talking, but again, it's one of the dumbest things that Afton has actually ever done in the series. Like, canonically it doesn't backfire somehow, but that's aside the point. Like, but seriously, why would you have a way to undo your evil plans? A 4-year-old can do this. The fact that this wasn't the canon ending is actually just insane how that didn't happen. Just bury the third machine, at least, goddamn. Like, if that's the intention behind it, just bury it and leave it, okay? Fill it with concrete and leave it. Jeez. And at 7, stealing security badges. Not only is Gregory just a really weird kid in general who wears Fazbear merch but also doesn't know that Chica loves pizza, he's also a thief. This guy steals so many things from the Pizzaplex, not even including all the little gift boxes that you can find around that are only optional. He also steals the security badges and ends up getting enough to have level 7 clearance as like a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or however old he is, okay? It's really unclear. Because like, he can't ride the go-kart alone, and he can fit inside of Freddy's chest cavity, but he can also speak full sentences with proper grammar and stuff, okay? I have no idea how old he actually is, but he is still able to gain level 7 clearance. But like, how are they so readily available for him to steal? And how is it that taking these badges always triggers some event that makes everything worse for him? Like, how are the security guards supposed to like use these badges if that's what happens every time they take it? Or, an even better question actually, how are these security badges laying around in special containers when security should just have their pass with their clearance level on it, like on their belt? Okay, I don't get it. Plus, how does gaining multiple level 1 passes end up adding up to a level 8 clearance? That's all, it's still all level 1, okay? I don't get it. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's almost as if they set it up for him to see how long it would play out or something, or how well he would do. I don't know. And at 6, fire. Okay, so during the true ending, otherwise known as the Afton ending or the Burntrap ending or whatever the hell you want to yell at me for not calling it ending, we have to fend off Burntrap's attempts to take control over Freddy by setting him on fire using what I'm guessing are the mechanisms that Henry uses to set the fire in FNAF 6, since this is the same location. However, it's incredibly convenient how we fall into the room that has all of this stuff in it, that it has the monitors set up connected to the cameras in the various rooms that Burntrap enters exclusively, with buttons that light the fires in the corresponding room that like has the camera on the monitor. Yeah, despite it being far more convenient for Henry to light all of them at the same time, I don't get how this works. Plus, I mean, like, if you think about it, how are these still working? It's clearly been a while, and some of the comments report that the Pizzaplex has been open for at least 4 years, which I don't know if it is accurate because, I mean, it's the YouTube comments. But if it is, these cameras and old-ass computers are still working 4 years after being set on fire that was enough to ruin the building. Not to mention also falling into a sinkhole that would have had to open up underneath it, since we have to travel down an elevator to actually get into this section of the pizza place. How is all of this still working after all of that? And if you say that it was Vanny, that even adds more questions, like why make sure the fire systems are working and then they're set to being separate buttons? Plus, why have the computer monitors set up to look at the right area? I don't get it. And how are these these computer monitors are literal dinosaurs. How did they work before the fire, let alone after it? This is the kind of thing that demonstrates the line between luck and intent, because there was no way this many things lined up for him, excluding plot armor, because we kind of need to ignore protagonist syndrome for this entire list. But still, if this was just happening, that would not happen. Never. No way. Halfway through into number 5, Ice Cold Captive. Gregory in the Faster Blast ending actually orders the robots to disassemble Vanny, since she just ordered them to disassemble Freddy. But like, disassembling a robot and a human are two very different things. Okay, trust me, I would know. I'm surprised the robots even listened to him. Adding on to that, the fact that Gregory is willing to kill Vanny here, it's pretty messed up, especially given that like most people assume that he's 10 or 11, which doesn't really seem to make sense. Either way, you could argue that he doesn't know any better, but clearly he does. Okay, this kid is able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation, use their upgrades on Freddy, he's willing to kill Vanny despite seemingly knowing her like we see in the best ending, and then he burns Burntrap multiple times to make sure he doesn't take over Freddy. Okay, what the living hell is this kid doing? Like, how was he raised? How is he so nonchalant about literally doing all of this? This guy kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go talk to Freddy, who is destroyed. Dude, Vanny is bleeding out not 3 feet from you. She is torn to shreds and you're crying over a robot that can be fixed? Something isn't right about this kid. He's supposed to be the captive here, but he's the one putting everyone else in danger, I swear. In it for recharge. What's the deal with airplane food and Glamrock Freddy and needing to recharge every 5 minutes, okay? Like, in the game sense, time isn't moving when I'm running around for 5 hours, since I haven't actually progressed the story. So if this animatronic is supposed to need to recharge every hour only, why is this such an issue? And why does he only use power when we're actually piloting him like a mech? If this is the case, shouldn't this man also be losing power when we summon him to grab us from the 3rd basement floor? Like, what? Why not? And why does he need to recharge but seemingly all the other animatronics don't? I never see Chica, Roxy, or Monty in a recharge station. Okay, even if you are around when they should be, when the hour hits. Okay, it's stupid, it's confusing, and it doesn't make any sense. It's almost like Freddy is doing this to us on purpose, either because he thinks that it's funny, or maybe he really is working for Vanny, but needs to gain our trust and make excuses for why he can't be around us all the time, so that he can just go and give her the information, or why he can't just why we can't hide inside of him all night, okay? There's something fishy going on with this animatronic, and I swear in the next game we're going to figure out that he betrayed us off screen. Or at least in the DLC we're gonna figure that out. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, the Afton ending. Okay, well, if you don't want to have the whole security breach game be a VHS, okay, how about the canon ending, or the Afton ending as some call it. The canon ending to this game is some of the most insane luck that Gregory experiences in his whole time at the Pizzaplex. This sort of thing is like catnip for these types of videos. I mean, when have you looked at one of these, or watched a found footage thing and thought, wow, this is so unlucky? Never. Okay, they always somehow end up having lucky thing after lucky thing happen to them. So let's take us falling into the room and then fighting off these robots. Just make it a damn VHS tape. Since honestly, trying to do the whole of Security Breach may be a little more ambitious than most people could reasonably expect, but that's just kind of the person I am, though. I end up thinking of cool things after cool things, so then I add them to the project, and then it inevitably becomes too ambitious that now it seems like a mountain I have to climb, so I give up. But then I also don't want to make the mountain smaller because all of these things would be so cool and I've already thought about them and want to include them. So yeah, it's happened with literally every project that I've had in mind, and it sucks. So how about this one, we just cut it down to the Afton ending? Is that better for anyone who can actually animate and do it properly? I hope so. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Claw. Elizabeth Afton getting grabbed by Baby is one of the most terrifying moments in the series. Possibly because Crying Child might have seen it, which would explain the mouths on the Nightmare animatronic stomachs. However, if we were to see a tape of this moment from Crying Child's perspective, whether that detail be canon or not, oh my fricking god, that would be so utterly terrifying that we may actually, I might actually freeze, okay? I don't know how to explain why a kid hiding in the bushes while his sister is grabbed by an animatronic claw while trying to get ice cream would be so shocking and horrible, except for how I just did it. But especially considering that this kid ends up turning into an absolute psychopath after this, and by that I mean Elizabeth, not Crying Child, but still, okay? The found footage that's of someone hiding for some reason is always scarier than someone who's in the middle of the action, because I feel like if you're hiding, you can point the camera at the scene, but if you're filming it and you're in the action, you're just filming your feet as you run away, because you're focused on running away, not filming it. Plus, in general, this is just a f***ed up thing to watch happen, be it in person or on video. And finally, in at number 1, scoopening. Okay, now, I know that you may be mad and may think that this is a stupid point, but hear me out, okay? The scooper may seem like a weird but normal thing, at least by FNAF standards at first, but with the blueprint revealing how this thing actually works, seeing this in third person from found footage would be absolutely atrocious. This thing can inject whatever it ends up scooping with Remnant, which is a molten metal possessed by souls, and it keeps a person alive after removing their insides, replacing it with robot parts, and then having those robot parts leave that body. In essence, just making that person a walking case of flesh. Do you really want to watch that happen from a security camera? Or even just watch it happen to someone else, okay? No. In Sister Location, we see it in first person, okay? All we see is just basically a mighty machine digging into our body. But from the outside looking at Michael, we would see so much more. And if it's from Ennard's perspective, it would only be worse. In at 10 to Rockstar Row. During the so-called interrogation and torture scene in Parts and Service, or at least that's what people are calling it, based on the titles of videos on YouTube, Vanessa questions Freddy about Gregory and accuses Freddy of helping us, which I mean is true, but she shouldn't even have to accuse him. More on that later. After telling him that she's gonna leave him down there until he can get put on a new endo, which doesn't really make sense if his coding is the issue and not the endoskeleton itself. Why would she leave to Rockstar Row through Roxy's lift? Why? When she could have easily just come our way and head into the main atrium. That's where Gregory is for the majority of the the game, and that's where all the animatronics are patrolling and have been spotting him. It would make more sense to go there than to Rockstar Row, where he was seen maybe twice at this point. Like, I don't know, it seems weird to me. I don't understand. Maybe like the whole logic behind this is that since all the animatronics are out in the atrium, she doesn't need to be there, or maybe she needs to be somewhere where she can get to her Vanny suit quickly, but I don't know. Even if it is Vanessa taking over and not like Glitchtrap at this point, I still don't get why she wouldn't just go to the atrium. And at 9, spring locking. Along the same vein as the Bite of 83 tape scenario, a found footage video from one of the missing children's spirits' point of view would be absolutely insane. Just like Blair Witch, but make it FNAF, and that's in essence what the spring locking is. Plus, I would love to get these things in more angles, especially the moment where William starts suffering for like the next 30 plus years, okay? That would make me happy. This man has caused me so much suffering that I hope I get to see him suffer even more, okay? This wouldn't even be a scary VHS tape for me, okay? I'm sure the sound of the spring lock when it actually happens would spook me in the moment, but it would be quickly washed away by pleasure, because this goddamn Mother Hubber would be suffering right there with me. And not like in a 50 Shades of I want people in pain kind of way, but more like seeing him suffer would make me smile, okay? I'm not gonna like hit up Chica afterwards or anything like that, but I'm definitely not gonna lose any sleep over it, you know? And at 8, March of the Toreadors. If you're confused by this number, don't worry, I'm going to explain it real quick. March of the Toreadors is the name of the song that plays when you run out of power in FNAF. It's the song that plays leading up to Freddy's jump scare. It's also slowed down for the games, and it's a song released by Georges Bizet, released in 1875, and from my understanding, now in the public domain. And while that's interesting, I mainly use the name to illustrate the part of the game that I'm talking about. Having a tape or a Blair Witch style video of you running out of power would be absolutely terrifying, okay? I can imagine it. And if it was made in a realistic way instead of being something like FNAF VR or otherwise with just like some filters thrown on top of it, if it was actually real, it would be terrifying. Okay, that's the kind of thing that would give people nightmares, and actual nightmares, not like the ones that I have where I just wake up panicking, then I'm like, oh wait, no, like actually scary. And at 7, Midnight Motorist. While the gameplay of Midnight Motorist itself is pretty simple, the intrigue comes from the hidden lore that we get from this game, all of which is fairly well known to my knowledge. I'm pretty sure everyone knows it, actually. You know how it's called later that night in the files, and the secret area at the bottom that leads to the whole other section with the Mustard Man and whatnot? Okay, good, glad we're caught up. So, imagine that whole Mustard Man minigame section as a VHS tape. That would be pretty damn freaky, right? I mean, like, especially given the location and the fact that this is a house alone in a clearing in the woods, okay? Very Blair Witch Until Dawn kind of location there, alright? And even if you want to just use the gameplay of the minigame itself, that's still pretty terrifying. And you know what? Maybe even more so. I've said this multiple times, but the idea that anyone we pass on the street could have just walked away from a gruesome murder is something that is, I think, at least, is one of the scariest realities we all face. Like, I've made jokes like you're only alive because every human you've seen has chosen not to kill you, and in reality that has way more truth to it than you would think. And this VHS tape would be like any other. But considering how later that night is commonly seen as later in the night William killed Charlotte, I think the implications of it would be pretty horrifying. And at 6, security breach. All of it. Considering how there are cameras all over the Pizzaplex that we are able to tap into somehow using our Fazwatch, I think it's fairly safe to say that this would be a realistic idea. And honestly, I think all the security breach moments could work as a tape. I mean, like, come on, okay? Especially when Vanny distorts the camera around her and makes herself invisible to Freddy, okay? An invisible psycho bunny out for blood, chasing a kid around a giant Chuck E. Cheese mall for 6 hours? Tell me that doesn't already sound like a horror movie. Especially when you throw in like the low quality video that is associated with old security cameras and VHS tapes, okay? Slap on top of that some well-placed static at intense moments, and boom, you have yourself the next Paranormal Activity series. I just think that the concept of security breach as a whole would do well with this style of video. But if you want me to be more specific, give me a minute and I will be. Halfway through, into number 5, finding Springtrap. Now, this is a moment that we actually didn't get to see, but the guys who opened Fazbear's Fright in FNAF 3, they found Springtrap in that back room, right? So why not have a tape of them actually finding the body? That would be some freaky shit, man. Especially considering how we know exactly what happens because of this discovery. The pathetic fallacy of these guys not knowing what they've done, but everyone watching knowing what this leads to already creates a pretty damn compelling feeling. But then throw in the horror and the fact that we know it's William Afton hardly clinging to life because he's stuck here until the one you should not have killed decides to let him go, and it just gets worse. But they also think that it's an animatronic that somehow just still works. So yeah, definitely something that would be an insane tape. Add to that the fact that we haven't actually seen this before, and I think we all love it. In at 4, Security Puppet. Another mini game from FNAF 6 that I think would make an incredible video, Security Puppet. And I mean like the whole finding Charlotte dead outside in the rain thing, not the whole do nothing until the final round because the green bracelet is stuck outside thing, okay? Because genuinely seeing this from the puppet's POV with like the green bracelet being highlighted and maybe even the only thing that is actually in color on the screen would make this so much more impactful, okay? The pain that the viewer would feel as we slowly crawl out to her bleeding body would be insane. And imagining like the sound effects of like faint screaming or like crying from Henry that we could also have in the background that gets slightly louder as we crawl, I'm actually getting chills right now. It doesn't even need to actually look realistic. You could do this in Source Filmmaker, and as long as the atmosphere is right and you have the sounds right and whatnot, it would be absolutely horrifying. Okay, I would hear those screams as I'm falling asleep, and I'd probably never be able to sleep again. Just saying. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Destruction. And isn't it convenient that there is a way to break every other animatronic that isn't Freddy? Okay, that leaves the animatronic broken in such a way that we can remove whatever aspect we actually needed to upgrade Freddy? Hell yeah it is. It's so convenient, in fact, that there is somehow a way to break them that just works perfectly for their personality, and the perfect amount of the animatronics as well. That works the first time. And even with Chica, okay, we push her into a goddamn trash compactor and somehow don't get crushed ourselves despite her grabbing onto us and pulling us with her. We only get pulled down into another area of the Pizzaplex that we can still get back to the Pizzaplex through, and you know, we weren't pulled into a thing that crushed our skulls. So yeah, needless to say that looking at this logically, it makes absolutely zero sense that any of this actually happened. Okay, we didn't even need to crush the animatronics, and instead we could have just chilled in Freddy's room until 6 AM when the doors opened. Ultimately, in at number 2, staying until 6. Speaking of which, Glamrock Freddy straight up encourages Gregory to risk his life in order to get out of the Pizzaplex, when in all honesty, the safest thing to do would have just been to keep him in your stomach or in your green room until 6 AM, especially after the door closes and he was definitely stuck, which just, it makes no sense whatsoever if Freddy is really meant to be protecting Gregory. There was no need for the whole daycare secret escape hatch thing. You could have just gone back the way you came and everything would have been fine. You wouldn't have been suspicious since you would have at least appeared to be like you listened to Vanessa after you saw her in the healing area and went actually back to your room, and then Gregory would have been safe, especially after you knew that there was some crazy bunny running around the pizza place looking to slaughter him. So yeah, if Glamrock Freddy is like supposed to be protecting him, he did a horrible job at protecting this kid. Okay, I don't understand. You can think of all the excuses you want for him, but if Gregory had just waited in Freddy's green room, everything would have been fine. That's it. That's period. And finally, in at number 1, probable betrayal. I know that nobody wants to believe me on this, okay? We all want to hold out hope that finally one of the animatronics is going to be good and trying to help us, but Glamrock Freddy, after everything on this list, is almost certainly evil and just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We've made a whole video about that, okay? And now, honestly, this one is kind of about that too. This guy makes some hella sketchy choices throughout throughout our entire time at the Pizzaplex and only makes things worse for us. He takes us to get healed despite us saying no and having a limited time to leave, which ends up making us get locked inside the Pizzaplex. We also just sit in the booth and don't actually get healed, by the way, okay? He was unable to access the main Pizzaplex network despite having no reason to be disconnected, since at this point he wasn't suspected of helping us. And after Vanessa leaves Freddy without his head and parts in service, she sees him fully reassembled in less than 5 minutes and doesn't question it, like I said. Almost as if it was the plan the whole time. There's no way that he could have been put back together normally, and they just don't care, okay? The only way that this makes sense, any of this makes sense, is that if Freddy is secretly evil, and maybe even he doesn't know it. Maybe Afton is like in the back of his mind just like waiting to come forward.
Number 10. The Fate of Charlie. Through the minigames we have learned that the puppet is another animatronic possessed by a spirit. It seems that the puppet is actually possessed by the soul of Charlie, Henry's daughter. Although this is a little confusing if we're factoring in what we know of Charlie from the books to try and tie that into one timeline. But if we just ignore the timeline part of it for now, which with FNAF I think is usually best, Charlie was Henry's daughter, a strong and independent girl who was killed during a visit to Freddy's restaurant, trapped outside, possibly having an allergic reaction and tragically dying out in the rain. Her spirit then went into a nearby animatronic, which happened to be the puppet.
And it's 7 true ending. The true ending of Security Breach is seemingly the scariest part of the game. This one is unlocked by finding the secret elevator in the section in Roxy's Raceway. It's down the stairs from where you find the test driver head. This requires your Freddy to have the Monty Claus and the Chica voice box, I guess. However, it is also possible that you can only get through it with the voice box if you like call Freddy to you. He can like appear on the other side of the gate and then smash through it because he's required to. But yeah, you have to do this after you stay to complete the game. You have to deal with a boss battle with one go, okay, without saving, so that's gonna be a pretty rough time since save states are disabled after you could have escaped. After making your way into Burntrap's area, Freddy will be taken over by Burntrap, and it's up to Gregory to defeat him using one of the 3 monitors and then pressing buttons to burn him. Players will also need to avoid the animatronic enemies that come for Gregory and use the doors to temporarily lock them out. When Springtrap is finally burnt for the final time, the blob, which was the whole tentacle monster thing, will attack him, making sure that he doesn't get free. At least, we hope that that's the case. Freddy and Gregory will be shown escaping and then sitting on a hill together, which is the first time a character has run away with an animatronic, and where an animatronic has not been a bad guy who ultimately betrays us in the end. So, yeah, that's significant, okay? Don't question me. And at 6, the one you should not have killed. The introduction of the one you should not have killed is probably the most confusing character ever. While we have had more confusing moments, the argument over who the one you should not have killed, aka the vengeful spirit isn't over. But no matter if it's Cassidy or Crying Child, the vengeful spirit was introduced as an explanation as to why Afton always comes back. A spirit that was possessing him and keeping him alive, which I called. I called that Afton was still living in the Springtrap suit, but all of you didn't believe me. And here we are. He was alive in the suit. And even after that, for some reason, you don't believe that I'm right about Crying Child being the one you should not have killed instead of Cassidy, despite my over like 350 different videos on FNAF. Okay, I feel like I know enough about this series, especially with the calls that I've made in the past. Okay, I was 1 day off on the Security Breach release date, 1 day, and you still don't think I know enough about this series. Come on, people, come on, just accept me as your overlord and this would all be so much easier. Halfway through into number 5, Dream Theory. The actual concept of dream theory is nothing new to any series, really. The idea that everything we've seen could just be a dream is possible with any form of media. But when it comes to FNAF, this idea made a lot of people upset, and I guess that's understandable. With everything being a dream, it in essence makes the lore worthless. So the hours and hours people spent trying to work it out being pointless if it was true. However, if this was the intention, we never knew, since in FNAF 4's ending we see a locked box with the now infamous line of perhaps some things are best left forgotten for now. And that for now has been around 6 years. Currently, according to Scott, from what I've seen, nobody has actually solved FNAF 4 yet, but then again, I don't think Scott knows who we are, so maybe I have and he just doesn't know it. But with the game surrounding a kid in a coma who's experiencing nightmares after getting chomped on by a seriously overpowered animatronic jaw, I think us getting the idea that this could be indicating that everything is a dream is a little on par for what the actual course was at that point. We were so invested at this point that we actually started scanning the source code, and again, found a real-world pizzeria thanks to the multiple 8s and 7s, and I still don't know if that was accidental or not. I don't think anyone does. I don't know if Scott actually knew about that or not. Maybe he was the one who put that on Google Maps. And at 4, soft reboot. The soft reboot the series is undergoing at the moment, and more so at the time that Help Wanted was released, was something that we had never seen before, well, at least in the FNAF series, and seemingly started the trend of characters from games becoming sentient and trying to escape the confines of games and come into the real world. That, you know, we see play out through the FNAF games after Afton becomes sentient code. But even then, the next game seems to throw that idea away while we're keeping what happened there, or at least in the mobile port canon with Princess Quest. It's a real issue, okay? The real issue comes from the next soft reboot they attempted to do in Security Breach again, with Afton now having a physical form. Again, his death being a mystery and the game setting up the next owner for wherever they want to go. And while I understand that, I wish you could have just like given it one path, you know, or like at least like just killed William off for us permanently. I'm still upset about that. Getting close to the end into number 3, Springtrap. Being the genius behind some of the most advanced robotic technology in his universe, we expect a lot from William Afton. He's the suit technician, but he's also the main killer. So, he should really know what he's doing, right? Well, apparently not. Since after discovering that the original 5 animatronics were possessed, he disassembles them to learn their secrets. This inadvertently releases the spirits of the original 5 victims, causing William to panic. Which is fairly reasonable, since firstly they're freaking ghost kids, and ghost kids are the scariest kind of ghost. And also because they're ghost kids that he killed. So this absolute animatronic genius, the mastermind behind everything, the technician that handles the suit maintenance and is explaining to every employee the proper procedure for the Springlock suits, including the spring bodysuit that he uses to kill, ends up climbing inside the suit in a panic in an attempt to make himself feel more powerful and maybe scare the ghost kids off. However, since he's so smart, he didn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling, the puddles on the floor, causing the spring locks that were active at this moment since it was in suit mode to fail, which would have killed him had he not been possessed by the vengeful spirit. But I mean, without Springtrap, we don't have FNAF 3, and we don't have, like, literally any other game after that, so kind of important. And ultimately, in number 2, FNAF 4. Not only is the spring locking important, and on top of embarrassing, but the next game, FNAF 4, is one of the most pivotal moments in the series. After what Scott intended to be the original end to the series after 3 games, he came out with a 4th after the community was disappointed with the Springtrap jump scare. So lo and behold, we get the Nightmare animatronics, and the story of Crying Child, who still doesn't have an official name, since the N in Evan is a stretch and the whole Gregory thing is still up in the air. However, this kid really changed the way we looked at the series, from thinking that William was a grieving father to, after looking closely, that he instead designed these animatronics to kill, and the mysteries of this game. What's inside the box? Who's the one who says I will put you back together? And really, what does it mean? It's been like 6 years after the game's release, and we've still been unable to definitively answer those questions. And that's why the series has lived on for so long, okay? The amount of mystery and intrigue is just too much for us as humans to ignore. As humans, we want answers. It explains a lot about society. But let me tell you, those who don't worry about FNAF have it made. I guess ignorance is bliss. They don't have to do this.
Number 1. Glitchtrap. During FNAF VR Help Wanted, we learned about the fact that somehow William Afton was still able to survive through an animatronics chip being scanned into the Help Wanted game, used to help create realistic replicas of the old animatronics. Somehow, this allowed some part of Afton to manifest, becoming a malicious code that was unable to be deleted. Help Wanted is such a meta game. It's games and games, and these games, this is a game in the world, but it's also a game in our world. What's real? What's reality? I don't know. So, even though William Afton was burned down with the rest of the animatronics in Pizzeria Simulator, we learn in Help Wanted that he somehow has managed to survive, and has managed to even recruit someone to potentially aid him in escaping the confines of his digital prison. It's more than likely that we'll learn even more about Glitchtrap in FNAF 8 Security Breach.
And it's at hints. Once we started looking for lore hints and clues in more than just the games, we knew that we were going to be in for some extreme buffoonery with this series. I mean, like, looking in the game game files is one thing, okay? People do that all the time, especially for popular games. But once we had to start looking in the source code for Scott's different websites, and then everything that followed that, we knew that there was nowhere safe from his tricks. We learned multiple things thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files. We know that after Sister Location, Baby gets into a fight with the rest of Ennard and gets kicked off the island because of the source code. We got so many 8s and 7s before the release of FNAF 4 that we found a real-life pizza place on Google Maps, and we were looking so deep we ended up finding the original names to files to find the name of Vanny before it was even released. So yeah, needless to say, it's certainly been a wild ride since we saw those 8s and 7s in the source code, and then it only got more intense. Can't wait to see where this series goes with the hints next. Oh, probably just scrolling them on the inside of my eyelids. In 9, hiding spot. How the absolute living hell did anyone end up getting away with this? Like, the smell of rotting bodies inside of animatronics would ruin the atmosphere. The heat of the animatronics moving as well, that would just speed up the decomposition, and the animatronics are in front of people every single day. And they even started complaining that the animatronics were leaking blood and mucus and were, quote, smelling like death. If this was real, and William getting away with this wasn't important for the plot of life, he would have been cut instantly. Like, oh, we never found the bodies of these kids. How about we look in these leaking animatronics? Because, you know, they're leaking blood and mucus and smelling like death. Oh, wow, look at that. There's bodies here. We found those missing kids. Afton, you're under arrest. Boom. Like, instantly. I don't get how this wasn't an open and shut case. Like, straight up. He was so goddamn stupid. Like, he shouldn't have made it past the first game. His plan is a whole dumpster fire of bad ideas, but the entirety of the series would be different had he not hid the bodies in the animatronics. So, well played, I guess, William.
Number 8. Stitchwraith. In the FNAF books, we have learned about the mysterious figure known as the Stitchwraith, which sounds like it could resemble perhaps Ennard, but apparently is kind of its own thing. Stitchwraith has yet to appear in the games, but is still horrifying and pretty important to the lore nonetheless. It was brought to life using the souls of 2 children combined with the powerful emotion of agony or suffering. In the Fazbear Fright books, it has shown up in each book, appearing during the end of each one of the stories there, and appears to be collecting haunted animatronics parts for what we can only imagine is some kind of dark and sinister reason. Of course, what we'd really like to know is to what purpose is Stitchwraith amassing its collection. Number 7. The Fate of Elizabeth Afton. Sister Location in my mind was one of the biggest for lore moments because it just gave us so many important revelations. It and Pizzeria Simulator for me are really the standout games for lore moments. In Sister Location, it's implied and sort of revealed that William Afton had a daughter, Elizabeth. He made the animatronic circus baby for his daughter, but apparently would not let Elizabeth play with baby because he felt it was just too dangerous. This was likely because he'd made it to basically be a murder bot, or because he knew it just could be potentially dangerous and it could malfunction. I don't know why, of course, you'd make a murder bot for your daughter, but hey, I don't think any of us have ever thought William would stand a chance at winning any awards for parenting, am I right? Elizabeth manages to sneak away from her father and the other children, finding herself alone with Circus Baby, who, as expected, murders her, luring her with ice cream. Sweet, sweet ice cream. Elizabeth's soul then becomes trapped in Circus Baby, changing Baby's eye color from blue to green. Number 6. Michael Afton becomes Mike Schmidt. During Sister Location, you play as Elizabeth's brother, Michael Afton, aka Eggs Benedict, as you become nicknamed by the malfunctioning hand unit. In the Sister Location minigames and during the main game that is Sister Location, we learn of your fate as Michael Afton after you are scooped out by Ennard during the true ending. Ennard remains with you, but we later find out as Michael's exterior continues to rot as time goes on, Ennard eventually leaves Michael, being vomited up by him during the minigames where we see him become more and more rotten and eventually fully purple. Circus Baby, however, tells you even without any insides that you won't die, and somehow, miraculously, Mike Afton comes back to life. just like that. It's then theorized that Michael Afton after this point became Mike Schmidt, changing his name and becoming the other Michael that we come to know as the protagonist in FNAF 1. Number 5. Remnant. Considering that the revelation of the importance of Remnant was also attached to the scooper we saw used in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental in FNAF's sister location, the substance itself is involved in a pretty scary and important lore moment. Remnant also appears in Special Delivery and is used there to power up your animatronics, in a sense, giving them life. It seems to be the life essence of the animatronics in the games. Based on what we know from the games, this implies that Remnant is basically a soul or a collection of souls, but in the books it's even implied that Remnant could be created out of intense distilled emotions, such as primarily suffering and agony. Number 4. Serial Killer. Throughout FNAF 1, it's hinted that something awful happened at Freddy's. Well, actually, a lot of things that were awful happened at Freddy's, and it's later revealed that one of those awful things was a bunch of children that went missing. You later find out that these children didn't just go missing, but were murdered by none other than William Afton, dun dun dun, who is of course the inventor of these animatronics. Of course, we're still not sure exactly why William killed these kids, but the fact remains that he is the serial killer responsible, and it's even believed that helping to create the franchise and its animatronics was his own crazy way of creating his own horrific killing ground. Number 3. Springtrap. One of the more shocking reveals was when we find out the fate of William Afton following the murders. He returned to Freddy's planning to dismantle the animatronics he'd built, but the spirits of the children he had murdered returned, hell-bent on getting their revenge. Terrified, William ran away and found the faulty Spring Bonnie model to hide in, knowing that the animatronics would not recognize him as a threat if he was also hiding in an animatronic suit. This part of his plan of course worked out, but due to William laughing at the thought of his own victory, which really he probably should have waited until the animatronics were gone, and due to water leaking onto the spring locks, the locks gave way, impaling William and killing him within the suit. His own soul then became trapped within that suit, as did his corpse, giving us the terrifying antagonist for FNAF 3, Spring Bonnie, the only animatronic in that game who could actually kill you, because all the other ones were just hallucinations or ghosts. Number 2. Freeing the souls. At the end of Pizzeria Simulator, we learned that we have unknowingly been running the pizzeria for a greater purpose that was previously unknown to us. Our boss, who we suspect to be Henry, which was William Afton's partner, has hired us, Michael Afton, as the manager of this pizzeria so that we would lure in all the evil and possessed animatronics. Once all gathered, our boss reveals that now it's time to end the cycle of bloodshed and let go and move on from the tragedies tied to Freddy's franchise. He urges the animatronics there, including a version of Circus Baby and William Afton's Springtrap, to be still and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. Thus seemingly ending the murderous rampage of so many villains that we'd known, and in theory ending his own life as he is nearby, and the life of you, the manager, Michael Afton, when he burns the pizzeria to the ground.
And finally, into number 1, live stream. After MatPat's big FNAF 4 theory relating to dream theory and how the entire series might be a dream, something later disproven by Scott, so thank God for that, there was still a series of cryptic messages that made us think a whole load of crazy for a while. And you know what? Maybe we were right at the time, but as the series grows, so does the story. It's like a living organism adapting to changes in its environment. Why would Toy Chica be missing her beak? And 4 games, 1 story could have made sense back then, but now we're not entirely sure if they have an impact anymore, since it's definitely more than 4 games. At the time, we thought that this meant that crying child was Michael Afton, something that honestly kind of made sense, in the weird FNAF way of making sense. But now, we've decided that it's not the case, and honestly, I think that this is the way the series will stay. Not about the Mike thing per se, but specifically that we will never know what's really going on, and that the story will instead be what we as fans make it instead of what Scott might have originally intended. Sure, he can help gesture us in a better direction that would make more sense with what he wanted and what he has planned, but I don't think that we'll ever know what Scott originally thought the story of the series would be. Hence why when Dawko asked him which FNAF 3 ending was canon, Scott said he wouldn't answer. And at 10, the discovery of Remnant. The discovery of Remnant is only really described to us in the original novel series, with William learning about the souls of the missing children being basically infused into the endoskeletons of the original 5 animatronics. He melts them down to make the fun times, but this is when his goal changes. Originally, he, from what we can tell with our limited information, was just killing for the sake of it, However, now he had a purpose. He wanted to find the key to eternal life, to immortality, whether it be to bring maybe an extra child back, or to keep himself in the land of the living. The moment William discovered Remnant, he totally changed his game plan. However, that's the importance to the FNAF story. To us, it could be when we discovered how Remnant was made in the Fazbear Frights books, when Dr. Phineas Taggart discovered that agony was the most powerful human emotion, and that the act of possessing something in the FNAF world was just your extreme agony latching onto a nearby object, which explains why it happened to the children, and then to William, which I'll talk about later on. And a 9 missing children's incident. The missing children's incident is really what started the FNAF series. It's also a tongue twister. It's a mystery that we all gravitated towards when we started looking into the first game, and it's the incident that really popularized the series, aside from it being terrifying. The incident has gone down in history as one of the scariest and most convoluted things in recent years, with whole threads being dedicated to why or how it happened, along with how William got away with it, since the suits were literally leaking body fluids like a rotting corpse would, and no one checked them out. It's incredible how far the series has come from just that one moment, and it being the catalyst for everything else. That makes it pretty important and very deserving of our number 9 spot. And before we get any further, if you're enjoying this video or just like the FNAF content in general, be sure you're hitting that like button on this one and all the videos to come. It really helps us out and it lets us know what you want to see more of. And at 7, Scooping 2, Electric Boogaloo. Michael's scooping, however, defined the next parts of the series as a whole. We learn that he's working to right his father's wrongs, and we think that he's been doing it the whole time, even though it could have been Henry. Check the link in the iCard for the theory on that. But Michael's scooping was different. Instead of him dying, we see him get filled with Ennard and then used as a skin suit to walk around in the world. We see his skin rot or bruise as it turns purple, drawing enough attention that Ennard thinks it's a better idea to roam the sewers as a mess of animatronic parts. But then he lets us know that he's coming after his father, so much so that once he traps him in Pizzeria Simulator, he stays there to make sure the deed is done, but it's not, and Michael gave his life in order for his father's reign of terror to end. But is this the last time we've seen Michael, or is always coming back hereditary? Only time will tell. Maybe reincarnation is a thing in the FNAF series. It very well could be. Scott's just pulling things out at this point. Getting close to the end in number 3, FNAF 6. FNAF 6 is another one of those ending sequences, where the series looks like it could have ended, and while slightly more convoluted, it would have been okay. We would have hammered out the rest eventually. The FNAF 6 ending, though, was indeed the end of multiple animatronics. Elizabeth, Charlotte, and Ennard were all released in the FNAF fire, as well as Michael, who stays to burn, and Henry, who stayed so nobody would remember this place or this story. However, we know one escaped. Springtrap, or Scraptrap, William Afton himself, managing to evade death once again, and it wouldn't be until later where we found out and understood how, and yet we figured he would be back. He always comes back, and now, with nobody to stand against him, he's free to do whatever he wants. Henry isn't fighting him, Michael isn't fighting him, they both thought he would burn, but he's free, as well as free as he can be while being stuck inside a video game world. For now. Penultimately in number 2, The Man in Room 1280. While plenty of people brush these books off as just books, the story of The Man in Room 1280 is one of the most important pieces of lore we have gotten from this series. It answers a question that we've all had since FNAF 3. How does William keep surviving? How does he always come back? And while it may seem minuscule, this is the biggest hint that we've gotten in ages. Learning that William was possessed by the spirit of one of his victims explains more in the series than any Easter egg Scott had left us. I don't care that Funtime Foxy can mimic voices, or how the Scooper can inject a Remnant. It mattered how William's signature line of "I always come back" is true, and this book delivered. It also explains how he came to possess a hard drive that got scanned into Help Wanted. It explains that since he was possessed, he was alive in FNAF 3, and that explains how he survived the fire in both FNAF 3 and FNAF 6. It showed us that everyone knows what he did despite not being convicted. It provided so much for us, and that makes it the most important piece of confirmed lore that we have. There is one moment that is more important, but we have nothing on it at the time of this recording. And that point is, finally, in number 1, the breaking point. The breaking point in this scenario is referring to the moment William started killing. We don't know when it was, we don't know why it was. To us, it's just always been a thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was an incident before that of the missing children's from the first game that was just his first kill. we don't know what drove him into killing, and there's no way that would have been the first, right? Nothing has been confirmed or even presented in the games. There are hypotheses that it was due to his wife or lover dying, perhaps due to childbirth, or that it was because one of his children died, but we know that can't be true unless he had another kid that we haven't seen, because he had designed animatronics to kill before his children died. There are really no indicators as to why he started on his mass killing spree. It could just be that he's insane and wanted to do it, or maybe he wanted to unlock the mysteries of life, or maybe it was just an accident the first time but then he got a taste for it. We don't know, and we don't even have any evidence to go off, so all of this is just hypothesis and guesswork. It can't even really be educated guesswork because we don't know enough about Afton himself to make a real connection. Like, we don't understand him as a person, if you kind of get what I'm saying. We know parts of his story, but we don't know what's in his brain, and that's what we would need to make an educated guess, at least from the crime shows I've watched.